Welcome back, my friend. Come in out of the cold. It is good to see you again. Find a comfortable chair, and let's take a moment to just breathe. The world outside is moving so fast, isn't it? It feels like we are constantly running, constantly chasing, yet never quite arriving where we are supposed to be. We feel fragmented. And I think deep down, many of us worry that we are missing something essential, something that was intended for us, but got lost along the way. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey to a place that time forgot. I want you to close your eyes and imagine the highlands of northern Ethiopia. Picture a landscape of jagged peaks and emerald valleys, where the air is thin and cold, and the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. Here, clinging to the side of sheer vertical cliffs, are ancient monasteries, stone fortresses of faith that have stood unchanged for over 1,000 years. In these stone corridors, the wind whispers secrets that the modern world has nearly forgotten. You see, the Ethiopian Bible guards something that we, in the West, have lost. It guards lost commandments, revelations that Moses received on the mountain, but that humanity never truly saw. For centuries, you and I and millions of believers assumed that the Bible we held in our hands was complete, finished, and sealed. We found comfort in that certainty. But let me ask you a question that might unsettle you, just a little. What if the most important pieces of the puzzle were never included in the book on your nightstand? What if the earliest Christians, the men and women who walked in the dust of the apostles, read texts, observed laws, and followed divine instructions that later disappeared? And what if they disappeared, not because they lacked the breath of God, but because they were inconvenient for an empire? We often feel that our history is the absolute truth. But what if everything you thought you knew about biblical history was only the edited version? In this discussion, we are going to uncover the story that survived only because Ethiopia stood outside the reach of Roman councils and imperial standardization. I want you to stay with me until the end, because the final commandment we will discuss, which is preserved only in these remote monasteries and supported by hard archaeological evidence, may completely shift how you understand the entire biblical story. And as we walk through this together, feel free to leave a like or a comment, because this investigation is only just beginning. Imagine, if you can, monks who have spent their entire lives, generation after generation, guarding manuscripts older than most modern nations. Imagine the smell of beeswax candles and old parchment as you open a book written in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia. Your fingers trace the heavy script, and you find laws that Moses received on Sinai. Laws never included in the Hebrew Bible, laws never translated into Greek, laws never copied into Latin, laws never accepted by the councils that shaped Western Christianity. These aren't myths, and they aren't rumors whispered in the dark. They are physical manuscripts, carbon-dated, preserved, and still read today. For over 1,700 years, Ethiopia preserved a scriptural tradition untouched by Roman politics. It was untouched by European theological debates, and untouched by the slow, eroding friction of copying and recopying that changes a text over time. While the rest of the world standardized the Bible into 66 or 73 books, Ethiopia held on to 81. And hidden inside those additional books, especially in the Book of Jubilees and First Enoch, are commandments about time, angels, justice, economics, purity, and covenant life. These texts challenge everything we thought we knew about Moses, about creation, and about the very structure of the universe. Today, you and I are stepping into that time capsule. We are reopening the vault, and we are about to discover why these commandments disappeared everywhere, except in the one place that refuse to forget. Stay with me until the last revelation, because the final piece is the one the world was truly never meant to see. Long before the great councils of the Roman Empire sat in marble halls to debate which books should and should not be allowed into the biblical canon. And long before Europe standardized its scriptures into the forms we know today, a different kind of story was unfolding far to the south, in the mountains of East Africa, hidden among ridges, valleys, and monastic fortresses. A truth that the rest of the world lost has survived in silence. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if the most accurate window into early Christianity isn't in Rome, or Jerusalem, or Athens, but in Ethiopia? This is a land that many theologians didn't even consider part of the discussion until the 19th century. To understand why the Ethiopian Bible is so important, and why it speaks to the ache in your soul today, we need to go back to the early centuries after Christ. This was a time when Christianity was beginning to spread along trade routes and across empires. Europe, especially the Latin-speaking West, would eventually shape the biblical canon we now consider standard. But Ethiopia developed differently. It was different geographically, politically, and spiritually. Unlike the churches near the Mediterranean world, Ethiopia wasn't woven into the roads, the postal systems, or the theological conflicts of the Roman Empire. Its Christianity grew in isolation, and this was not by accident, but it was the natural result of the terrain and culture. Massive stone plateaus, deep valleys, and natural fortifications shaped its religious identity just as much as its monasteries did. This isolation created something scholars today call a time capsule, a sealed environment where ancient traditions could survive without being overridden by outside authorities. Think about how exhausting it is today, constantly being told what to think, constantly having to update your worldview. While Christianity in Rome was undergoing fierce debates about orthodoxy, heresy, liturgy, and canon, Ethiopia simply kept copying the texts they had received. They preserved them in the ancient liturgical language of Ge'ez for over 16 centuries. They didn't edit, they didn't redact, they just remembered. In the 20th century, researchers discovered something astonishing. Ethiopian biblical manuscripts, especially Enoch and Jubilees, matched the Dead Sea Scrolls more closely than any European manuscript tradition. This wasn't a coincidence. It was evidence. Scholars like Dr. James Vanderkam, Dr. Ephraim Isaac, and Dr. Steve Delamarter documented that Ethiopia preserved textual traditions that predate the canon decisions of Europe. When the Council of Laodicea in 336, and later the Council of Rome in 382, narrowed down which books should be considered scripture, Ethiopia wasn't present. It wasn't even informed. And so the Ethiopian Church simply continued preserving what they already considered holy. One of the most striking examples is the Garima Gospels, stored in the Abba Garima Monastery. When these illuminated manuscripts were carbon dated, they were found to originate sometime between 330 and 650 AD, making them among the oldest surviving Christian manuscripts in the world. And unlike manuscripts in Europe, which went through translation chains, from Hebrew to Greek to Latin to vernacular languages, the Garima Gospels were translated directly from early Greek sources into Ge'ez. Then, they were copied without revision, generation after generation. Imagine a manuscript copied by monks in the 5th century. Then, the next copy in the 9th century looks nearly identical. Then another in the 14th century, still nearly identical. The level of consistency is extraordinary. Scholars examining these manuscripts found minimal variation, suggesting a disciplined tradition of preservation unmatched in most of the Christian world. While Christianity in Europe debated which books were inspired, Ethiopia simply kept everything they had received. That included texts like 1st Enoch, Jubilees, 1st Esdras, the Ascension of Isaiah, the Book of the Covenant, and the Book of the Mysteries. And friends, these weren't fringe writings. Fragments of several of these texts were later found in the Qumran caves, confirming they were used by early Jewish and early Christian communities long before the councils of Rome and Laodicea excluded them. This is why scholars sometimes refer to Ethiopia as the control group for biblical studies. In a scientific experiment, the control group is the sample that never receives the treatment, meaning it preserves the original conditions. Europe's Christianity received centuries of theological treatments. It underwent canonization, translation, and political standardization. Ethiopia did not. It kept the ancient library intact. And that library contains laws Moses received, but the world never saw. They are preserved in books like Jubilees and Enoch with astonishing accuracy. But here is where the story becomes even more surprising. These ancient manuscripts don't just preserve stories, they preserve laws. Commandments allegedly delivered to Moses by angels that reshape everything we think we know about time, worship, justice, and human destiny. So, what exactly are these lost commandments? And why do they begin with something as unexpected as a different calendar? Let's step into part 3. And I want you to open your heart to this. Imagine walking into a monastery library deep in the Ethiopian highlands. The air smells of dust and sanctity. A monk hands you a manuscript translated into Ge'ez over 1,500 years ago. You open it, expecting ancient stories, maybe genealogies, maybe commentaries, but instead, you find something far more radical. You find a divine calendar said to have been given directly to Moses by an angel on Mount Sinai. A calendar that contradicts every system used today, whether Jewish, Christian, Roman, or global. What if the very way humanity measures time, our days, our weeks, our festivals, and even the year itself was once a commandment of God, and we abandoned it? This is where the first 3 lost commandments begin. According to the Book of Jubilees, preserved fully only in Ethiopia and in fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls, Moses didn't just receive the 10 Commandments. He received a complete revelation of how time was structured in heaven. It was written, as the text says repeatedly, on the heavenly tablets. It was not symbolic. It was not cultural. It was law. And it starts with something shocking. Commandment 1 is to keep the sacred solar year of 364 days. Jubilees chapter 6, verses 32 through 38, lays it out clearly. The year must contain 364 days. It must be divided into 4 seasons of 91 days each. Each season must follow a 13-week structure of perfect symmetry. And the first day of the year must always, without fail, fall on a Wednesday. Why Wednesday? Because that is the day God created the sun and moon in Genesis. This wasn't astronomy, my friends. It was theology. A calendar was a covenant. Why 364 days? Because 364 divides perfectly by 7. This means that every feast day, every Sabbath, every appointed time of worship would always fall on the same weekday, every single year. It was divine order. No drift, no confusion. Compare this with the lunar calendar used by the temple in Jerusalem, or the calendar we use today. Months drifting, festivals shifting, sometimes adding a 13th month just to stay aligned with the seasons. Jubilees condemns this practice directly, saying Israel will go wrong, lose track of Sabbaths, and defile the appointed times. To the authors of Jubilees, and to the Qumran community who possessed at least 15 copies of it, keeping the wrong calendar wasn't a minor administrative error. It was apostasy. And yet, Nearly all Jewish and Christian believers today follow calendars based on lunar cycles, Roman adjustments, and later papal reforms. So, if Moses received a solar calendar on Sinai, where did it go? This leads us to Commandment 2, which is to keep the festivals on fixed days of the week. If the year always begins on the same weekday, then every feast lands on a predetermined structure. Passover is always on the same weekday. Pentecost is always on the same weekday. The Day of Atonement is always on the same weekday. This structure is impossible under a lunar or Roman calendar, but Jubilees insists the festivals were designed to follow an unchanging cosmic rhythm. The Qumran sect took this so seriously that they created solar calendars, sundials, and temple-styled schedules based on these patterns. To them, keeping the divine festivals on the wrong day was equivalent to offering strange fire before God. And finally, Commandment 3 is to honor the cosmic Sabbath structure. Jubilees ties Sabbath observance neither to culture nor convenience, but to the structure of creation itself. The Sabbath is woven into the architecture of the cosmos, and violating it disrupts the divine order of time. It is not merely about rest. It is about aligning oneself with the rhythm of heaven. Thus, every unit of time, the day, the week, the month, the season, the year, has a sacred pattern. Break the pattern, and you break the covenant. Why were these commandments removed? By the 4th century, Christianity faced a political dilemma. Adopting a 364-day calendar would have meant abandoning the Jewish lunar system, rejecting the Roman Julian calendar, and creating a separate Christian timekeeping system that would fracture the empire. Unity required a unified calendar, and so a sacred time became an inconvenience. Europe chose Rome's calendar. Ethiopia kept Jubilees. The questions that remain are haunting. If sacred time was once commanded by God, if the heavenly tablets recorded a perfect 364-day structure, and if Qumran and Ethiopia preserved it consistently, then what else did Moses receive that the world never saw? To answer that, we must step into the next lost revelation, where angels are not just messengers, but legal witnesses. Let's uncover Commandments 4 and 5 in Part 4. When most of us think of angels, what comes to mind? We picture gentle messengers with soft wings. We see warriors in shining robes, or guardians who step in quietly when danger is near. It is a comforting image, isn't it? We want to believe that there are benevolent forces watching over us, keeping us safe in a chaotic world. But my friend, that is not how the ancient world understood them, and it is definitely not how the Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Enoch describe them. What if I told you that angels were not simply divine helpers, but legal officials in a cosmic court? What if everything you say, everything you vow in the quiet of your heart, every covenant you make, and every promise you break is being recorded? Moses was explicitly told to honor this reality. And this is where Lost Commandments number 4 and 5 reveal a worldview far more structured, far more judicial, and frankly, far more awe-inspiring than the simplified angelology we find in our modern Bibles. Commandment number 4 is this: live before the witness of angels. In the Book of Jubilees, Moses receives a revelation from a being known as the Angel of the Presence. This is not a cherub on a greeting card. This is a heavenly being described almost like God's attorney, delivering divine testimony directly from the throne itself. This angel looks at Moses and tells him plainly, humanity is never alone. Every action, every covenant, every secret transgression is overseen and documented by angelic scribes. Jubilees. Chapter 1 and Chapter 3 emphasize this repeatedly. Angels observe. Angels record. Angels testify. Angels submit reports before the Almighty. This is not a metaphor for your conscience. It is judicial. The concept appears again and again on the heavenly tablets, a theme that is central to Jubilees. These tablets serve as the cosmic archives, containing the laws, the appointed times, and the unblinking records of human behavior. Angels are described as the custodians of these records. For ancient Israelite groups like the Qumran community, this wasn't mystical poetry. It was spiritual accountability on a cosmic scale. To violate a covenant wasn't merely a personal sin or a mistake. It was the breaking of a legal agreement, observed and notarized by angels. And this leads us to the fifth lost commandment. Commandment number 5. Honor the heavenly court and its angelic hierarchy. Jubilees, along with 1 Enoch, which is preserved fully only in Ethiopia, lays out a detailed hierarchy of angels. We see angels of the presence, angels of sanctification, guardian angels, intercessory angels, recording angels, angels over elements, nations, and cosmic forces. This hierarchy is not vague mist. It is organized. It is structured. It is deeply judicial. The angel of the presence speaks for God. The recording angels document the span of human lives. Other angels administer judgment. Several sections of Enoch describe angels opening books, presenting evidence, and pronouncing verdicts over nations and over individuals. This worldview is echoed directly in the New Testament. Did you know that? The Book of Jude quotes 1 Enoch, referring to 10,000s of his holy ones coming to execute judgment. The phrase "books were opened" in Revelation reflects this exact same legal framework. Early Christianity clearly knew this worldview. They embraced it. So, why was it removed? Why did Rome reject the angelic witness system? By the 4th century, Christian leaders were concerned. They worried that angelic hierarchies and judicial roles were becoming too influential in the minds of the people. Bishops feared that believers would start praying to angels, assigning them too much authority, or developing theologies that competed with the Church's growing institutional power. The Council of Laodicea in 363 explicitly banned prayer to angels, and any text like Enoch or Jubilees, which gave angels too much legal authority, became suspicious, even dangerous. So, the angelic witness system slowly disappeared from Western Christianity. It was replaced with simplified, safe images of angels as messengers or silent guardians. But Ethiopia preserved the full system. In Ethiopian liturgy and theology, angels remain legal witnesses, intermediaries, record keepers, and cosmic administrators, exactly as Moses was told. The awakening question is this: if Moses received laws about angelic testimony, if Enoch, Jubilees, Qumran, and early Christians all believed in the heavenly court, and if the New Testament itself quotes these ideas, why did these commandments vanish everywhere except Ethiopia? And if angels serve as the cosmic court reporters, who were the angels that fell? Who violated their own heavenly roles? Who corrupted humanity with forbidden knowledge? To uncover that, we must follow the trail into the most controversial text of all, the Book of Enoch and the story of the Watchers. Let's step into part 5. Long before theologians debated original sin, and long before Augustine or the medieval church tried to explain why the world is so broken, another explanation circulated among ancient Jews and early Christians. It was older, it was stranger, and it was far more unsettling. It came from a book so influential that the New Testament quotes it directly, yet so controversial that later councils forced it out of the biblical world. What if the true origin of human corruption wasn't Adam and Eve eating a fruit? What if it was angels who violated the boundaries of heaven? This is the world of 1 Enoch, preserved fully only in Ethiopia and known in fragments at Qumran. And its story changes everything. It speaks of the descent of the Watchers. This is the event the Bible hints at but never explains. Genesis chapter 6 contains a few mysterious lines about the sons of God who descended, took human wives, and produced giants, but the text gives no details. It is abrupt, cryptic, and unsettling. Enoch fills in the missing story. According to 1 Enoch, chapters 6 through 11, 200 angels known as the Watchers descended on Mount Hermon during the days of Jared. This was long before Moses, or the patriarchs. Their leader, Semjaza, swore an oath with the others. They would all bear the guilt of what they were about to do. They took human women. They produced hybrid offspring, violent giants who consumed the land, but worst of all, they taught forbidden knowledge. And this is where the story becomes explosive. Forbidden knowledge. These were the teachings the Watchers gave to humanity. Enoch lists what each fallen angel taught. Azazel taught weapons of war, swords, shields, and metallurgy. Barachiel taught astrology. Kokabiel taught the constellations. Sariel taught lunar cycles and occult calendars. Armoros taught enchantments and spells. Shamsiel taught the paths of the sun. Pinemu taught writing and secret knowledge. Now listen closely. This knowledge wasn't sinful by accident. It was knowledge humanity was not meant to have. Not yet. Not in that form. It made humans violent. It made them manipulative. It made them seek power beyond their created limits. According to Enoch, evil entered the world through illicit revelation, not merely human disobedience. The fall wasn't just about temptation. It was about the corruption of divine order. Why was this story too dangerous for the canon? Early Christians actually believed this story. Jude verses 14 and 15 quotes Enoch word for word. 2 Peter references angels bound in chains of darkness. Several church fathers admired Enoch: Tertullian, Athenagoras, Clement of Alexandria. So why did the councils later reject it? Because Enoch creates theological problems. One, it challenges the doctrine that evil began solely through human sin. If angels introduced corruption, then evil isn't just mankind's fault. And that disrupts later doctrines of sin and redemption. 2, it presents a detailed angelology the church couldn't easily control. Named angels, ranks of angels, sinful angels. It was too complicated, too mystical. 3, it suggests divine knowledge can be dangerous. This clashes with a later Christian intellectual tradition shaped by Greek philosophy. 4, it implies a cosmic rebellion outside human history. This is harder to integrate into simple catechisms or sermons. In short, Enoch explains too much, and that made it too powerful. So Enoch disappeared from European Christianity, not through burning, but through non-copying. Manuscripts faded. Only Jude's mysterious quotation remained. But Ethiopia kept the entire book. Then came Qumran, the archaeological confirmation. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, scholars discovered Aramaic fragments of Enoch. Some matched the Ethiopian version nearly word for word. This changed everything. It meant the Ethiopian Enoch wasn't a medieval invention. It was ancient. It was authentic. It was once mainstream. Dr. Geza Vermes, Dr. James Vanderkam, and Dr. George Nicholsberg all confirmed this. Enoch reflects a worldview central to Second Temple Judaism, which means Jesus and his earliest followers would have known it, quoted it, and believed parts of it. The question that follows is heavy. If Enoch tells the true story of how evil entered the world, if the earliest Christians used it, and if archaeology confirms it, then what else did humanity lose when the councils removed entire books? The next set of lost commandments reveals laws so dangerous to political empires that removing them became almost inevitable. To uncover them, we must step into the realm of economic justice. Here, Moses allegedly received commandments about debt, land, and freedom that could overturn entire civilizations. Let's move to part 6. If the earlier lost commandments dealt with the structure of time and the architecture of heaven, the next set strikes even closer to home. Because they redefine something at the heart of every civilization: power, property, debt, and economic control. In fact, these commandments were so radical that it becomes immediately clear why later Christian empires could never allow them to survive. What if Moses received economic laws that required the cancellation of all debts, the return of all land, and the liberation of all servants? Laws powerful enough to collapse feudalism, slavery, and imperial wealth overnight? These are lost commandments 6, 7, and 8, preserved in the Book of Jubilees. Commandment 6 is this: debt release is not charity, it is divine law. In Leviticus chapter 25, we see early traces of the Jubilee, where debt is forgiven every 49 years. But Jubilees transforms this idea into something far more cosmic. According to Jubilees chapter 23 and chapter 50, debt forgiveness is mandatory. It is part of the divine order. Ignoring it leads to catastrophe on earth. The text even connects Jubilee observance with the presence or absence of evil itself. It says, "And there shall be no Satan nor any evil destroyer." To the authors of Jubilees, debt isn't simply an economic burden. It is a spiritual chain. And releasing someone from debt doesn't just free their finances, it heals the world. Imagine medieval Europe with this law. Imagine the Roman Empire. Imagine modern banking systems. Debt would not be a tool of control. It would be a timer, counting down toward liberation. No empire could allow this. Commandment 7. Land must return to its original families. Jubilees reinforces and expands Leviticus 25 by insisting that land cannot be permanently bought or sold. Every Jubilee cycle, families recover their ancestral land. Wealth cannot accumulate endlessly. No elite class can form through land ownership. This is one of the most politically explosive commandments in ancient literature. Dr. Norman Gottwald's research on Israelite society confirms that Jubilee's vision would prevent generational wealth concentration. It would prevent hereditary aristocracies and large landowners dominating the poor. Under this system, no billionaire, pharaoh, or emperor could exist. Every 49 years, the reset button would be pressed. Imagine the implications. Roman senators losing their estates. Medieval lords returning half their lands. Modern corporations losing entire portfolios. This commandment wasn't merely religious, it was revolutionary. Commandment 8. Liberation of all servants. Every Jubilee cycle, in Jubilees chapter 50 and chapter 23, freedom is not symbolic, it is scheduled. Bondservants, indentured workers, and slaves were to be released at fixed intervals. Ethiopia preserved manuscripts describing this in detail, matching Qumran's practices of communal property and economic equality. Scholars believe the Essene community at Qumran tried to practice a version of this system. Communal living, shared resources, no permanent economic hierarchy. Jubilees wasn't utopian, it was a legal blueprint. And here is where the story becomes even more significant. Why did these commandments disappear? When Christianity became the religion of the empire, Rome needed tax stability. Rome needed land control. Rome needed permanent servitude systems and economic hierarchy. Jubilee laws undermined all of that. A religion built to unify an empire could not include a law that destabilized wealth. Thus, Jubilees was removed, its commandments forgotten, its economic vision buried. But Ethiopia preserved the book, and echoes of Jubilee practices remain in its ancient traditions. The uncomfortable truth is this: if Moses received laws that equalized wealth, if ancient Israel once practiced them, and if the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed their authority, then perhaps Christianity didn't just lose a book. It lost an entire economic worldview, a worldview designed to prevent oppression, poverty, and permanent inequality. So, if the earlier commandments threatened political calendars, and these commandments threatened economic empires, what comes next threatens something even more personal: marriage, family, bloodlines, and purity laws so strict that the early church had to hide them to survive. Let's uncover Commandments 9 through 11 in Part 7. For centuries, theologians have debated how Christianity transformed from a Jewish movement rooted in Mosaic law into a global religion open to every culture, tribe, and nation. But there is a missing chapter, one preserved only in Ethiopia and in the fragments of Qumran. A chapter so strict, so uncompromising, so incompatible with the universalizing mission of early Christianity that it had to be erased. What if Moses received commandments about marriage, purity, and family lines so restrictive that if they had remained in the Bible, Christianity could never have spread beyond a tiny ethnic community? These are lost commandments, number 9, number 10, and number 11, preserved in the Book of Jubilees, a text that expands the Torah's purity and marriage laws into an intricate legal code far beyond anything in Exodus, Leviticus, or Deuteronomy. Commandment 9. Guard the covenant bloodline. Jubilees teaches that intermarriage is not merely a cultural concern, it is a capital offense, not just with Canaanites, as in the Torah, but with all Gentiles. Jubilees chapter 30 and chapter 37 declare, "No Israelite may give a daughter or sister to any Gentile. Those who do shall surely die." The sin brings shame upon Israel. There is no redemption forever for a mixed lineage. This isn't advice. It is presented as divine law, delivered to Moses, written on heavenly tablets. Now, imagine the implications. Abraham could marry foreigners in Genesis. Moses marries a Midianite woman. The genealogy of Jesus includes Ruth, Rahab, and Bathsheba, all non-Israelites. If the Jubilees commandment were accepted as Mosaic law, then Jesus' family line would violate covenant purity. Paul's mission to Gentiles would contradict divine instruction. The early Christian movement would collapse before it began. So, the law vanished from the Western canon. Commandment 10. Marry only within your tribe. Jubilees goes further. It doesn't only prohibit Gentile marriage, it restricts marriage within Israel itself. Jubilees chapter 41, verses 23 through 26, commands that Judah must marry within Judah. Levi within Levi. Benjamin within Benjamin. Every tribe must preserve its lineage. In modern terms, this would mean no intertribal marriage, no merging of family lines across the 12 tribes. Israel must remain a constellation of distinct, pure-blooded tribes forever. The Qumran community, who preserved many copies of Jubilees, took this seriously. Their sect lived in strict endogamy. They married only within their own group, preserving spiritual purity through lineage. But imagine Christianity trying to spread into the Roman Empire while upholding these laws. It would be impossible. Not strategically difficult, literally impossible. The religion would remain ethnically locked within Israel. So, the law quietly disappeared. Commandment 11, expanded purity and Sabbath laws. Jubilees also contains rigorous purity codes that surpass Leviticus. Sabbath laws are expanded. Jubilees chapter 50 and chapter 2 forbid cooking, traveling, drawing water, carrying burdens, engaging in marital relations, or discussing business, all on the Sabbath. These laws are more detailed than the Torah and appear centuries before the Talmudic expansions that Rabbinic Judaism later developed. Dietary laws are intensified. Jubilees chapter 7 and chapter 21 command stricter slaughtering methods, absolute prohibition of eating animals that died naturally, and penalties for consuming blood far harsher than in Leviticus. These aren't innovations. They are presented as laws given to Moses directly by angels. But here is the problem. Jesus allowed his disciples to pluck grain on the Sabbath. He healed on the Sabbath. Paul declared all foods clean. Early Christians rejected Jewish dietary laws entirely. If Jubilees purity commandments had remained in the canon, then Jesus' life would appear to violate divine law. Paul's teachings would contradict Moses. Christianity would never detach from Judaism. So these laws were removed, not because they were historically insignificant, but because they were theologically incompatible with the Christian mission to the Gentile world. Why did Ethiopia preserve these laws? While Rome reshaped Christianity around a universal message, Ethiopia maintained biblical traditions closer to ancient Jewish Christian practices. Stricter fasting rules, dietary distinctions, ritual purity observances, and endogamous marriage customs within the faith community. For Ethiopia, Jubilees wasn't a threat. It was scripture. The question that follows is critical. If Moses received commandments about time, angels, economics, marriage, purity, and tribal structure, if all these exist in manuscripts confirmed by archaeology, and if Christianity removed them not for truth but for practicality, then what ties all these commandments together? What was the worldview beneath them? A worldview so vast it defined creation, covenant, and destiny. To answer that, we must explore the 12th lost commandment, the one that unites them all into a single cosmic system. Let's step into part 8. For 7 parts now, we have been walking this road together. We have uncovered laws about time, about angels, about economics, purity, and marriage. We have looked at laws that reshape everything we thought we knew about Moses and ancient Israel. But my friend, I need you to lean in close for this, because this is where the picture comes into focus. These commandments were never meant to stand alone. They were never meant to be isolated rules in a dusty book. They are pieces of a larger system, a worldview so unified, so cosmic, and so ancient that losing it meant losing the very architecture behind biblical law. We often feel like our lives are fragmented, don't we? We have our spiritual life on Sunday, our work life on Monday, our moral life, our financial life. We feel scattered. But what if Moses didn't receive isolated laws? What if he received an entire cosmic worldview, a heavenly constitution that explained how time, morality, angels, purity, economics, and human destiny were all woven together into a seamless tapestry? This is the essence of Lost Commandment number 12. Honor the cosmic covenant system, written on the heavenly tablets. To understand this commandment, we must first understand the worldview behind ancient texts like Jubilees, 1st Enoch, and the traditions preserved only in the highlands of Ethiopia. We must talk about the heavenly tablets. This is the missing framework of Mosaic law. Throughout the Book of Jubilees, the narrator, who is the angel of the presence, repeats a phrase we no longer encounter in most of our modern Bibles. He says, "For this is written and ordained on the heavenly tablets." Can you picture that? In this worldview, laws are not historical accidents. They are not culturally evolving guidelines that change with the times. They are eternal truths, recorded in heaven before the foundations of the earth were laid. Everything Moses receives, every festival date, every purity rule, Every lineage law and every Sabbath command is said to be written on these tablets. This means Mosaic law was never meant to be interpreted separately from the cosmic order. It was a reflection of it. The law on earth was a mirror of the law in heaven. Thus, the 364-day calendar reflects heaven's perfect rhythm. The angelic witness system reflects a heavenly court structure. The Jubilee economic laws reflect the restoration cycle of creation itself. The lineage and purity laws reflect boundaries established before the earth existed. Commandment 12 tells humanity not just to follow individual rules, but to align life with the cosmic structure itself, a universe built on covenant architecture. I know that sometimes the world feels random to you. It feels chaotic, like there is no plan. But in this worldview, the universe is not random. It is a legal universe. Time is legal. Festivals are legal. Angels operate within legal jurisdictions. Human behavior is documented in legal archives. Consequences unfold according to legal decrees written before creation. To live righteously is to live in rhythm with creation. To sin is to disrupt the order God built into time, bodies, land, and covenant. This is not the moralistic worldview of later Western theology, which often reduces faith to simple behavior management. This is cosmic, it is architectural, it is judicial, and it explains why the lost commandments exist. The calendar matters because time itself is sacred. Marriage boundaries matter because lineage reflects cosmic structure. Dietary purity matters because bodies mirror heavenly holiness. Sabbath matters because it anchors humanity into the rhythm of creation. Jubilee matters because economic imbalance disrupts divine order. Angels matter because they enforce the cosmic legal system. This is why commandment number 12 is the key. Without it, the other commandments appear extreme, or perhaps arbitrary. But with it, they fit into a system of beautiful, cosmic design. So why was this commandment impossible for later Christianity? Why did we lose this grand architecture? By the 4th century, the Roman Empire needed a religion that unified diverse cultures, languages, and regions. A cosmic legal worldview with strict boundaries around marriage, timekeeping, purity, economics, and tribal structure could never survive inside a universal empire. Rome needed fluidity, a faith based on one calendar, one ethnicity, one law, and one cosmic structure cannot become a global institution. Thus, the councils removed the books that contained this worldview: Jubilees, Enoch, the Testament of Moses, and other covenant texts preserved only in Ethiopia. What survived was a simplified system. It was ethical, it was spiritual, it was symbolic, but it was without the original cosmic architecture. But Ethiopia, cut off from Roman politics by mountains and deserts, preserved the full system intact. The hidden implication is profound. If these texts truly reflect a worldview Moses received on Sinai, if their authority is confirmed by the Dead Sea Scrolls, and if early Christians quoted and used them, then the Bible we know today is not simply shorter. It is structurally different. It no longer contains the cosmic constitution that once explained everything else. The question that leads us forward is a heavy one. If such a vast worldview was removed, if entire books containing the cosmic architecture were excluded, who made those decisions, and why? To answer that, we must leave the quiet of the monastery and step into the council chambers of early Christianity. We must look at the room where bishops voted on which books survived and which were erased from history. Let us uncover the politics behind canonization in Part 9. For over 1,000 years, believers assumed the Bible fell from heaven, complete, untouched, and universally accepted. We want to believe that, don't we? It makes us feel safe, but history tells a very different story. A story of debates, councils, political maneuvering, and strategic erasure. A story where the difference between inspired scripture and forbidden text was often decided not by prophets, but by committees. What if entire books that God-fearing communities once treated as scripture, were removed not because they were false, but because they were inconvenient for an empire? This is the hidden story of canonization, and it explains exactly how the lost commandments we uncovered could vanish everywhere, except in Ethiopia. Before the councils, early Christianity had no unified Bible. In the first 3 centuries, Egyptian Christians used one collection of books, Syriac Christians used another, Greek-speaking Christians used still another, and Ethiopian Christians used yet another, larger than most. There was no universally accepted list. Churches read Jubilees, they read Enoch, they read 1st Esdras, the Prayer of Manasseh, the Ascension of Isaiah, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Didache. Many were treated as authoritative scripture. It wasn't theology that forced a standard Bible. It was politics. Consider the Council of Laodicea in 363 AD. This was the first attempt to close the canon. Around 30 bishops gathered in Laodicea to issue 59 canons regulating Christian practice. Canon 60 listed which books Christians were allowed to read publicly. Jubilees, Enoch, 1st Esdras, and the expanded covenant texts were all excluded. Not with fanfare, not with heresy trials, not even with explanations, just silence. The books were simply not on the list. And in a world where books survive by being copied, a book excluded from the liturgy becomes a book no one bothers to copy for the next generation. This is how books die. Not by fire, but by neglect. Then came Carthage and Hippo, narrowing the canon further. The councils of Carthage and Hippo, in 397 and 393, confirmed the same basic list. Each time, fewer books were allowed, more were excluded, and the definition of orthodox scripture narrowed. Scholars like Dr. Lee Martin MacDonald and Dr. Bruce Metzger show that these decisions were influenced as much by political unity, anti-heretical strategy, and Roman centralization as by theology. The empire needed uniformity. Uniform scripture meant a unified population. Books that promoted alternative calendars, angelic hierarchies, strict purity laws, or tribal lineage requirements complicated that mission. Then came Jerome's Vulgate, the final filter. The most decisive moment came when Jerome was tasked with creating a standard Latin Bible, the Vulgate. When he encountered books like Jubilees, Enoch, 1st Esdras, or the Prayer of Manasseh, he labeled them Apocrypha, simply because they were not in the Hebrew Bible used in Palestine at that time. Never mind that early Christians read them. Never mind that church fathers quoted them. Never mind that Qumran preserved them, or that Ethiopia still considered them scripture. Jerome created the Bible millions would later assume was original. What he excluded, Europe forgot. The mechanism of erasure was censorship by non-copying. No book was officially burned. No decree declared, destroy Enoch. Instead, something far more subtle happened. If a book isn't approved for liturgy, scribes stop copying it. If scribes stop copying it, the book disappears within 100 years. Only fragments remain. Within 300 years, even those are lost. Within 1,000 years, the book exists only in rumors. This is exactly what happened to Jubilees, Enoch, and the covenant text, containing the lost commandments, except in one place. Why did Ethiopia remain untouched? The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church did not attend the councils. They did not use the Vulgate. They did not accept Roman canon lists. And they did not participate in imperial reforms. They simply kept copying the texts they had already considered scripture for centuries. As a result, Enoch survived only in Ethiopia. Jubilees survived only in Ethiopia. Additional covenant texts survived only in Ethiopia. When Western scholars rediscovered these books in the 18th and 19th centuries, they were stunned. The lost commandments weren't lost. They had been protected. The question that opens the last door is this: if councils removed books for political reasons, if scribes allowed texts to die by silence, if the complete Bible is actually edited, then what else survived outside Rome's reach? What other manuscripts lie hidden in Ethiopia, untranslated, unstudied, and unseen? To answer that, we need to go beyond canon lists and into the monasteries themselves. In Part 10, we uncover the remaining 85% of Ethiopia's manuscripts, and the secrets monks refuse to let the outside world see. High on isolated cliffs, guarded by rope ladders, stone walls, and monks whose lineages of service stretch back more than 15 centuries, lie the last untouched biblical archives on earth. These are not museums. They are not tourist sites. They are living sanctuaries, repositories of a Christian tradition older than Rome's canon, older than Europe's manuscripts, and in some cases, older than entire nations. What if 85% of Ethiopia's ancient manuscripts, still untranslated, still unphotographed, still locked away in monastic vaults, contain texts, laws, and prophecies the modern world has never seen? We have journeyed through the lost commandments. We have traced how councils removed entire books. We have examined how Ethiopia preserved what Rome erased. But the most astonishing truth still remains. We have only seen a fraction of what Ethiopia holds. A living archive older than canon itself. According to the Ethiopian Manuscript Imaging Project, led by scholars like Dr. Steve Delamarter, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church holds over 800,000 manuscripts. 800,000. It is the largest ancient Christian manuscript collection in Africa, and arguably in the world. Yet only 10 to 15% of these manuscripts have been cataloged, photographed, digitized, or studied by researchers. The remaining 85 to 90% remain in cliffside monasteries like Debri Damo, in ancient churches in Gondar, in hidden vaults in Aksum, and in remote mountain hermitages known only to local monks. Many of these manuscripts have never been touched by non-Ethiopians. Some have not been opened in centuries. When scholars arrived, they were told no. Western scholars have spent decades trying to access the deepest layers of Ethiopia's manuscript tradition. They are welcomed warmly, for Ethiopian Christians are famously hospitable. But when they ask to photograph certain manuscripts, the monks give the same answer. These cannot leave. These cannot be copied. These are too sacred. Dr. Ephraim Isaac himself documented monasteries with restricted sections, rooms only senior monks may enter, containing books not shown to foreigners because they are spiritually dangerous, too powerful, or easily misunderstood. This is not superstition, it is caution. The Ethiopian Church watched for 1,700 years while Europe ignored its canon, rejected its books, questioned its authenticity, and nearly erased the texts it preserved. Why would they hand over their last secrets now? What lies in the untranslated 85%? Researchers already know enough to suspect something monumental. 1. Complete versions of texts, previously known only in fragments. Books we know only through Qumran scraps may exist in full in Ethiopia. 2. Lost commentaries of early church fathers. Some manuscripts contain writings attributed to ancient theologians whose works disappeared entirely in Europe. 3. Variant readings of biblical books older than European manuscripts. Differences that could reshape our understanding of early Christianity. 4. Apocryphal acts, visions, and prophetic writings. Texts referenced in antiquity but lost elsewhere may survive here. 5. Liturgical practices frozen since the 4th to 6th centuries. These reveal how ancient Christians actually worshipped long before Roman standardization. But the most intriguing possibilities involve texts the monks openly acknowledge. 6. Books too sacred to reveal. Certain manuscripts kept in Aksum, Lake Tana monasteries, and Debri Damo are said to contain expansions of Enochic material. Covenant laws never included in any Western canon. Genealogical histories tracing biblical figures beyond known sources, and visions attributed to pre-exilic prophets. None of these claims can be verified fully, because the manuscripts remain sealed. We must speak of the Ark tradition of Aksum. Perhaps the most famous guarded relic in Ethiopia is the Ark of the Covenant, said to rest in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum. Only one guardian monk may see it. Tourists, scholars, even patriarchs cannot enter its chamber. Whether the actual ark lies there is secondary. What matters is what the tradition represents. Ethiopia sees itself as the guardian of what the rest of the world lost. It preserved Enoch. It preserved Jubilees. It preserved the expanded Mosaic laws. It preserved the heavenly tablets worldview. And it preserved commandments erased by Rome. What else has it preserved? We may not know for years, maybe decades, maybe never. But the truth is simple. The largest untouched biblical archive on earth belongs to a Christian tradition that never edited its scriptures, and the world has only begun to look inside. You have just completed a journey through 1,700 years of forgotten history. We have walked through lost commandments, erased books, suppressed laws, and manuscripts hidden in the mountains of Ethiopia. If something in your spirit feels awakened right now, if you sense that this story is bigger than what you were taught in Sunday school, if you are ready to go deeper, then write the word truth in the comments. That single word marks you as someone who refuses simplified history, someone who honors the guardians who preserved what others tried to destroy. Subscribe and hit the bell icon, because in the next investigation, we will uncover the suppressed prophecies of Enoch that early Christians believed but later councils buried. The truth isn't hidden anymore, but it must be sought. God bless you on your search.